EAGLES, Eagles.
What's good, Eagles fans? Welcome back to another edition of Football 24/7. I'm your guy, Tony DeShields II, and I'm joined by our Eagles insider, John McMullen, who does amazing work for JAKIBSports.com, who also does amazing work for Sports Illustrated, and also does spectacular work on Birds 365 with John McMullen. Before we get too deep into the content, you guys, y'all know what to do. Smash that like button. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the content. Also, make sure you guys comment below if you're watching this live stream after the fact. We appreciate everyone who watches the content. And before I get too far ahead of myself, I gotta let you guys in on something. Yesterday, my power went out, and I'm super apologetic for the fact that I left my man John McMullen hanging. I really didn't mean to do that, but I'm not an electrician, and I also don't work for the city or the state of Texas or the city of. Well, I'm not going to say
the state of Texas. Yeah,
it sounds crazy, doesn't it? It sounds crazy, but I'm not going to give you the city. I'm not going to give you the city, but I am in Texas. Texas is pretty big, so I doubt you guys would be able to locate me that way. But but John, how are you doing, my man? How are you feeling today?
I'm doing well. Yeah. Last day of practice before the first preseason game, so that's pretty exciting, huh? Definitely. 23 in a row. History about to be made in Baltimore. DeShields.
That is such a weird streak. I mean, I can't wrap my mind around it. It's some kind of juju going on at M&T Bank.
Yeah, everywhere. They haven't lost a preseason game since 2015. It is. I joke about it all the time. It is one of the weirdest things because it's not like they play their starters all the time. The fact that you're able to win. Obviously, John Harbaugh's trying to win these games, and he's. I've talked about coaches in the past. I covered Denny Green. Denny Green believed winning was a habit, as he described it. And, yeah, when you're out there, you try to win the game. Nick Sirianni says the same thing. But the fact is, when you get to your third stringers, at some point you figure, well, the other team's just going to have – and a lot of it has to do with who has the better third-string quarterback, to be honest. And you would think over that span – somebody would have been better than the Ravens. It really is an amazing streak. Meaningless, but amazing.
Yeah, for sure. 23 games. How many years would that be? That because they changed the preseasons from 4 games to 3 games. What, 2 seasons ago?
It dates back to 2015. 2015.
Wow.
So they're creeping up on a decade if they can keep it going.
Yeah, that is wild. So before we get into the depth chart, because the Eagles did release their
one of my low-key favorite days of the world, as I say.
Really? Okay, I can't wait to get to that. But before we do, I gotta keep you on your toes here. What's going on with this Eagles injury report right now? Who's down? Who's up? Give us some insight on that.
The Eagles are probably bolstered again because as we get to week 1, there's 2 guys on the injury reports. Patrick Johnson, who was carted off, but thankfully it's not a serious injury, but he's still out with an ankle. And so was Deon Cain. And that's it. Everybody else, Nakobe Dean got back on the field today fully. James Bradbury was back fully earlier. So everybody's healthy. If Nick Sirianni wants to play them, which of course he will not, everything's CIA level with Nick Sirianni, even preseason week 1. He's pretending like he still doesn't have a decision. He does, but I don't know. I can't explain it. Nobody cares, Nick. If you're watching, nobody cares.
Yeah, the Eagles are keeping everything G14 classified. Shout out to Rush Hour and Chris Tucker. So let's get into this depth chart. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball.
Can I just say, don't take this seriously, people. It is not. It comes from the media relations department,
right?
And no offense to those guys, but sometimes they're not paying attention. So people lose their mind. And look, I mean, the funniest part is the running backs. They just put them in alphabetical order, all 5 of them.
Yeah, they're not slick, by the way. That was I saw your tweet. That was pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, Kenny Gainwell's kind of taken a leg forward over the past week or so. And if I've said if this were a real game, he would be the lead back in the group. But it's early. It's August 10th. Over the next, week, they have 2 preseason games and they have 2 joint practices. So, they play obviously Baltimore on Saturday, Cleveland's in Monday and Tuesday for joint practices, and the game is Thursday with the Browns. So, a lot of work, a lot of pads, a lot of reps coming up, and there's still time for Rashad Penny, DeAndre Swift to step up and take that mantle away from Kenny Gainwell. I know a lot of fans believe that's going to happen, and they're going to be shocked. I think I really do. They're going to be shocked because what you believe the reputation of those players are, or is, or were, they're not outperforming Kenny Gainwell at training camp.
Yeah, the running backs on the depth chart is pretty funny. Like you said, they put them in alphabetical order, but I noticed they kept Kennedy Brooks out of the party.
Poor Kennedy.
Poor Kennedy, man. He couldn't even make the alphabetical order list. But your tweet, you said it's likely going to be Kenny Gainwell, and you say that now. I mean, he's gotten the bulk of the snaps in training camp. He has the most experience in the system outside of Boston Scott. So it's really interesting because, initially, you would think DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny, like they seem like the more talented guys, right? But I think this goes beyond just talent at this point.
Well, I mean, Kenny's a talented guy. I mean,
that's not taking anything away from Kenny, by the way.
Kenny's another guy. Look, I don't understand. I always say it. There's some guys who get pigeonholed into certain situations, and I don't know. I don't know. This is one of those again where I can't explain it. You're going to have to explain it to me, because there are people who haven't seen a rep in training camp, who haven't seen a rep of this team, and they are concrete belief that Rashad Penny, who, probably haven't seen play all that much, and DeAndre Swift are better. Where does that come from? Where does that come from?
I think they lean on their past history, but the history of Penny is can't stay on the field. DeAndre Swift can only give you 12 to 13 games a season. I mean, hasn't had 1,000-yard running season, but he's had 1,000-yard total yards from scrimmage season before. But Kenny Gainwell, I'm expecting big things from him this season. This is his first season without Miles Sanders. Obviously, he's playing alongside some pretty talented guys, but I think this can be a big year for Kenny. What do you think?
Yeah, well, look, I don't want to overstate it and say that I have all this confidence in Kenny Gainwell being an all-pro, because that's where people are going to go get it. No,
well, he has a big opportunity, right?
He has a very big opportunity. This is a weak group. This is a weak group as a whole. When I talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, maybe the deepest team in the NFL, I'm talking about the defensive line. I'm talking about the offensive line. I'm talking about the receivers, the quarterback, the cornerbacks. I'm not talking about even I feel a little bit more comfortable at safety now after watching Reed Blankenship over the past 2.5 weeks. I feel more comfortable at safety. I do not feel comfortable at running back if I'm the Eagles, and I do not feel comfortable at linebacker, obviously. And as they signaled by bringing in Miles Jack and Zach Cunningham. So, he's the best of the group that they've got together right now. But they spent what they spent. Like I always say, contracts don't tell you everything. I'm not trying to say they do, but they tell you a lot. They tell you a lot. And nobody was knocking down the door of Rashad Penny because of the injury history. I'm not saying he wasn't a talented back coming out and when he was healthy, but I think, this assumption that everybody stays in some kind of stasis when you tear your ACL, it affects you. When you break your fibula, it affects you. And Rashad was talking today, as a matter of fact, talking about how he's, the Eagles have helped him when it comes to his diet and nutrition, trying to get him as healthy as possible. So hopefully that helps him. He's lost some weight. He thinks that'll help him. And we'll see, when the pads come on, and they have been in camp, but I mean, live reps, games, he'll have an opportunity. He's going to play in Baltimore. He'll have an opportunity to show if he can still be the guy people think he is. DeAndre Swift, I got to tell you, Tom, he's got, fans used to criticize Miles Sanders for kicking it outside too much. Times that by about 5. DeAndre's always kicking it outside.
Well, Coach Staley, when he went over to Detroit, I think when Detroit was on Hard Knocks, you saw there was a clear disconnect between Coach Staley and Swift when it came to what Staley wanted from him. Staley wanted him to put his head down and get between the tackles, and too often Swift would bounce it outside.
Yeah. So I think from when this started, because when this started, I thought Swift would be the lead back and Kenny would be the third down back. Sort of, that's how the Eagles would go about it. Now I think it's turned. And Gainwell's going to be the lead back and Swift's going to be the third down back. The Eagles have kind of found out what the Lions found out. He's a great receiver, but he's not going to take the football in between. Like one of the underrated aspects of Kenny Gainwell's game, he is a good runner between the tackles.
Absolutely.
Shouldn't be. You look at him, 5'8", 200 pounds, looks undersized. He's got a real knack for and the Eagles have used him. You've already seen this. They've used him in the red zone. In practice, they use them in backed up situations. Yesterday, they were backed up against their own goal line at the 2-yard line. First play, run up off the left side to Kenny where Kenny got 5 yards, bang, in between the tackles.
Do you think that's a mentality thing? I'm like, because it has to be. I mean, a guy like Swift, he's dealt with injuries, and you would think that because of his injury history, it would make him a bit skittish about running in traffic and getting caught up in the jump.
Skittish, Kenny was talking that as well. If you're a running back in this league, I don't think you're skittish, but okay. I think there's certain guys, and DeAndre has an explosive ability, and Miles, to a certain degree, was the same way. And they kind of always want to hit a home run. And what you were referencing with Deuce Staley, it's great to hit a home run when it's there, when you square up the pitch. All right, swing for the fences. But the point is, if the play's blocked for 3 yards, you better get 3 yards. And the good backs will get 4 or 5. What you can't do is get a negative run because you're trying to kick it outside or lose, maybe get 1 yard when you should get 3 yards. So that's what coaches always say. Get what's blocked. And the really, really good backs get more than that. They'll get yards after contact and things like that. The really physical backs, but can't hit a home run every play. And if it's blocked for 3 yards, you better get those 3 yards. And if you don't, that's where you get, sort of pigeonholed. That's what happened to DeAndre in Detroit. It seems to be what's happening to him here in training camp with the Eagles as well. So maybe the Lions were right.
Yeah, maybe they were. We're definitely going to find out for sure in the long run. Last question on the running backs, and then I'm going to transition to right guard. Outside of Kennedy Brooks, I see 5 guys here. How many running backs do you anticipate this team taking into the season?
4.
How many did they take last year into the season?
I believe it. Yeah, it was 4. It was Miles. It was obviously Boston, Kenny, and they carried Trey Sermon for the entire year, which tells you they liked him. Um, and he's in the mix. But I think, if you ask me, the two guys who are going to be on this team 100% right now are Kenny and Swift, DeAndre. Everybody else, it's likely that Boston Scott's going to be here. But if Rashad Penny can be the kickoff returner and they like Trey Sermon, they could move on from Boston Scott because there's a little bit of a ceiling there. I talk about Rashad. If they say, you know what, if Rashad's not going to be a meaningful part of the rotation, it's not a lot of guaranteed money. They could just move on. And then Trey Sermon, if he doesn't deserve to be on the 53, you could probably, if he plays poorly in preseason, you probably get him on the practice squad anyway. So you can just go that way and keep him in the organization, get him through waivers, and put him on the practice squad.
The right guard spot with Cam Jurgens, I think you and I pretty much knew that was a foregone conclusion. But walk me through your mindset right now with that right guard spot and what you've seen from Cam to justify him being the starter outside.
Well, let me say again, this depth chart is not.
It's very unofficial.
It's not. Yeah, it's not a foregone. That's not. It is a what I'm trying to say is it is a foregone conclusion that Cam is going to be the starting right guard, but not because of this depth chart. He's taken every first team rep.
Right.
The competition never developed. He's played well. No glaring mistakes. He's a good player, and he'll fit in. I think pretty seamlessly. The only issue is, if Jason Kelce does get hurt, he's also going to be the backup center. So then you have to move him inside the center, and then you have moving parts. And Stout doesn't necessarily like that, but that's, they've lost some depth, and they're not quite as deep on the offensive line as they were last year. But that was not going to be possible to keep that up because last year Cam was a backup, and Andre Dillard was here. I mean, that's ridiculous depth on the offensive line, not to mention the Driscolls of the world. So they knew Andre Dillard's getting paid $10 million.
Hey,
you can't keep a player like that as a backup. And obviously they lost Isaac, so who also got $8-9 million, whatever he got from Pittsburgh. So they're not quite as deep, but their starting five is still the best in football.
I noticed on the defensive side of the ball, Kelly Ringo and Josh Jobe on this very unofficial, I'll reiterate that, very unofficial depth chart. Those two guys are listed as the primary backups to Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Walk me through why do you think that is? And, I'm curious as to why Mekhi Gardner maybe hasn't, garnered that type of attention, so to speak, from this depth chart.
Well, part of it, I mean, Kelly's going to make the team.
Right.
Josh Jobe is appropriate. Josh Jobe has played really well. I mean, he is the backup outside corner. So,
But has Mekhi been able to push them? Has he been able to somehow rock the boat there?
No, but he's done a really good job as an undrafted rookie. I mean, he's been better than Ringo.
But they drafted Ringo, so we know what that is.
Yeah. And Ringo's got a higher upside. But just if you're talking about, how they played in training camp, Mekhi's played better. But Ringo's got a really high ceiling. Josh has been tremendous. He's the backup outside corner. So if Bradbury or Slay go down, Josh would be the first one in. And then Kelly's here to be a long-term prospect and certainly is going to be on the roster. And, you have to start talking about how many corners can you keep. And I think they're going to keep 6, and they're tremendously deep. And that leaves Mackay on the outside looking in. And you got to hope you get him through waivers. And that's one where maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if he didn't play well in the preseason, to be honest, to try to get him on the practice squad to get him through waivers. But yeah, he's a big physical corner, and he's played well, but it's just it's a tough numbers game for him. You have to keep remember. So we're talking about nickels as well. So we're talking Bradbury, Slay, Maddox, Josh Jobe, Zach McPherson, Kaylee Ringo. So, I mean, that's good. That is a good group. And to the point where, Greedy Williams, a former second-round pick, he's not even close. Mario Goodrich, they don't want to lose Mario Goodrich. They think they have 3 nickel corners. And their top nickel corner last year, Josiah Scott, isn't even in the conversation.
Yeah, where is he? I actually don't even see him on here. There he is. Okay, Josiah Scott, got it. He's a guy who made a play here and there last season. I think he had an interception in that Packers game, and he had one in that Saints game. So I mean, he's
an NFL player. And he's cross-trained. He's got some versatility. He plays safety as well. So he plays nickel and safety. But they can't keep him on the 53.
Right.
They just can't. Hopefully, if they can get all those guys through, and I'm talking about Garner, Goodrich, and Scott, they would put all 3 on the practice squad if they get them through waivers.
With this preseason game coming up, and obviously, again, we're dealing with an unofficial depth chart, and Nick Sirianni refuses to give up the launch codes to the starting guys for this game. But I'm curious, by your estimation, who are you most looking forward to seeing out there perform? Who to you is an intriguing watch in this upcoming matchup with the Ravens?
Well, I'm interested to see what we talked about to start the show, the running backs and the linebackers, because those are the 2 positions I'm concerned about. And not necessarily the starters or the people they project, because, they're Nakobe Dean, probably, if he does play, it'll be a series or 2 and he'll be out. But, everybody else basically at linebacker could be on this team, could be cut. Almost every single player. If you ask me, like, who's going to make this team at linebacker, same thing. Two players, 100%. Nakobe Dean, Christian Ellis. That's it. Everybody else, even, people will see that Miles Jack got signed and Zach Cunningham got signed and say they'll be here. Not necessarily. They gotta prove it. They gotta prove that there's gas left in the tank.
Yeah, they're not owed anything. Their contracts are strictly, if you're here, you get your money. If not, then
yeah. I mean, if you're a betting man, I'd bet on them being here,
right?
Because they're better probably on paper than the guys they're here to replace. But I mean, they were on the street August 6th. That's not a good sign.
Right.
And people make the comparison to Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh a lot, came in season. But, Linval and Ndamukong especially,
they're a bit decorated.
They're not only decorated, but they were really old by NFL standards. Ndamukong mid-30s, 35, 36. Linval was 33, I believe. You know, that's old. These guys, Miles Jack and Zach Cunningham, they're still in the 27, 28, you know, and people are saying, no, we're not going to sign you. So just because they have big names doesn't mean they're that, what I was talking about, that stasis of being the same. They were good players at one point. Are they still good players?
Yeah, you know, I want to talk about this safety room because Malcolm Jenkins was in attendance today. And we all know what Malcolm Jenkins brought to the table for the Philadelphia Eagles, helped deliver Super Bowl 52 to the city of Philadelphia, the first Super Bowl championship. And you know, he's pretty much solidified as I guess some people will probably call him an all-time Eagle. But you know, he was in attendance today. You know, if I'm Reed Blankenship, if I'm Sidney Brown, if I'm Kevon Wallace, and any of those young guys, right? If I'm any of those guys, I'm running directly to Malcolm Jenkins. I'm making a beeline to Malcolm Jenkins to try to pick his brain and figure out, you know, like some nuances or some tricks to the trade. Well, wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you know Malcolm's around, here's the thing about coaches. They have coaches. I mean, they're going to their coaches. You know, a lot of guys don't even, know who, Fletcher, I say all the time. Fletcher doesn't like football. He says it all the time. He doesn't watch football. He doesn't want to be around football when he doesn't have to be around football. It's his entire life. Understandable. So he just
happens to be good at it, right?
Yeah. So he wants to get away from it. Josh Sweat. I was trying to think of that's why. Josh Sweat. Somebody asked him about the Kelly Green jerseys, and they brought up Reggie White. It was my buddy Rob Kessner. They brought up Reggie White and some of the old Jerome Brown, yada yada yada. And Josh is like, "Hey, I'm going to be real with you. I'm not a fan of the history of the game. Doesn't know." So what I'm trying to say with a lot of young people, I think the assumption is all Eagles know about Eagles history.
Right.
That is not the case. And, maybe some guys do go over to Malcolm. And Malcolm's a tremendous leader, was a tremendous player, but he's not a coach. They have coaches. They're working with coaches. Not a coach yet. Maybe wants to be a coach. I don't know. But, that's DK McDonald's job. That's who they're working with, and that's who they should be working with.
You bring up an interesting point about the fact that some of these guys aren't necessarily football lifers, right? They don't necessarily eat, sleep, and breathe football. Josh Sweat, Fletcher Cox, they want to get away from the game. They just happen to be tremendously talented at the craft, and they leverage that talent into tremendous financial gain, and you got to respect it at that. But one guy who stands out to me as someone who really is a student of the game is Nolan Smith. He had a quote today, that really stood out to me. He basically was saying, quote, "Man, if you've ever walked up the field with an injury, every time you go out there to practice to anything, I'm going balls to the wall. It don't matter. Preseason practice, I'm giving it my all because I remember that feeling in my heart when I couldn't play another snap. Most people think it's a game, but man, if you really live that ish day in and day out, and you walk off that field and knowing, man, I don't know if it's going to be my last snap. Well, you'll go harder than you've ever been." End quote. That's a football lifer right there.
Yeah, and by the way, when I talk about guys like Fletcher and Josh, I'm not saying they don't like football.
I got you. I definitely don't want to imply that either.
Yeah, I'm saying like Josh is very focused. Josh is a perfect example. He's very focused, tremendous player. I think he might be the most underrated Eagle.
Yeah, he doesn't talk much either.
No, he's very quiet. But he's a great player. But he doesn't know about the history of the organization. Like he got drafted here. It's his team. He loves his guys. He loves the organization, but he doesn't delve into the history of the organization. That's all I'm trying to say.
I got you.
In the case of Fletcher, like, Fletcher's one of the greatest Eagles defenders of all time. Of all time. You don't get to that position without liking the game and liking what you do. But when you're in that grind, and it is a grind, when you have some free time, you want to get the hell away from it.
Right.
So, everybody, it's one of my favorite times of year. The depth chart. Also, when a TV person asks Fletch what he's going to do during the bye week, are you going to watch the Cowboys? Or going to always just looks at him. It's like, I don't watch football. He's trying to get away when there's a chance to get away. Look, when Jalen Carter got drafted here, he didn't get drafted here and immediately start studying the history of the organization.
Right.
He's thrilled to be here with his teammates, and that's where it extends to.
Yeah, a guy like Noah Smith, he's and again, this not even history related, to the Philadelphia Eagles, but just his intensity, when it comes to his approach and his commitment to just being able to always stay ready, so you ain't got to get ready. That's something to definitely marvel at.
And by the way, on the other end of the spectrum, some guys do. Some guys embrace it. Some guys do. But I would say that group is, much smaller than the other group.
Got it. So before we get out of here, can you give us any of your key observations from training camp today? Anybody who stood out? Who were your offensive and defensive MVPs? Who get your game ball on the offensive side and the defensive side? What were your observations today?
It was a light practice, 55 minutes, and that's with developmental, which is understandable because they went back to back to back, and they're playing on Saturday. For the first time, the second team got more reps than the first team. As you can tell, they're trying to get those guys are going to play the most, obviously. So Marcus Mariota got more reps than Jalen Hurts for the first time at practice. So it's a lot of backup players. Josh Jobe, a guy we were talking about, man, he is just having a great camp. He's back on the second team because James is back, James Bradbury. He was just locking people down. He did a tremendous job. Marcus Mariota's played really well now for the third consecutive day. He had a great ball handling touchdown. It's a 2-yard line, faked the inside handoff, hid the ball like he was Aaron Rodgers, and just walked into the end zone. Everybody was looking at the running back. Everybody in the end zone, bunch of reporters, we were all looking at the running back. It was just phenomenal what he was able to do. So I'm going to give Marcus. Marcus is having a good week. He had a good practice. I'm going to hit, and it was about the second team, as I said, more than the first team. So I'm going to give him the game ball. And Josh Jobe. I mean, Josh Jobe, I said, that's the first lockdown second team corner I've ever seen because he locked down the second team. He's been really good. And there was a lot of talk about who's going to step forward between Greedy Williams and Kaylee Ringo and Mekhi Gardner and Eli Ricks, and almost even to Eli Ricks because he had such a big reputation coming out of high school and at Alabama. Josh was kind of in the background, and he was like, it was Williams, it was Ringo, it was Ricks, and Josh Jobe. He was kind of like the last guy, the and guy, and he's been by far the best, by far, not even close. It's lapping the field.
So I got to sneak one more question on you, John. Josh Jobe, again, the guy who's just been showing out in training camp. And Kelly Ringo has been making some plays as well. Mekhi Garner, guys like that. And then you have Darius Slade, Maddox, and Bradbury starting. I gotta ask you, and I know you've only covered this team since 2016, the beginning of the Doug Peterson era. But has the Philadelphia Eagles cornerback room ever had this positive of an outlook?
Not since I've been here, and you'd have to go back even. They obviously had some good cornerback duos with in the bet, but the depth as well. They're deep. They have more than. I think they're going to keep 6 corners. Most teams keep 5. I think the Eagles are going to keep 6 because they have to keep 6. I think they have 7 or 8 NFL corners on this roster. And I can't come up with a time when that was the case. They have a lot of talent at corner. And the backups aren't proven, because they haven't gotten to play because Slay has stayed healthy and Bradbury has stayed healthy, and the year before Steve Nelson stayed healthy. So fans don't necessarily get to see it, but we get to see it in practice. Zach can play a little bit, and I think he's better suited for the nickel. So I think he's a better player inside. Josh can play. Kaylee Ringo's got tremendous potential. Mekhi Gardner's going to be an NFL corner. I'm not even talking about Greedy. And Greedy Williams was a 2nd-round pick.
Right.
And I don't even think he's going to make the practice squad.
Wow. Well, there you guys have it. This is a very fascinating team to watch, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So much talent, but still very little experience in some key spots like linebacker and safety outside of Terrell Edmonds. But there are some question marks still. We got to see how this thing pans out in the long run. But with this preseason matchup coming up against the Ravens, the undefeated and the future undefeated Ravens, this is going to be really interesting to see how this thing pans out. John, before we get out of here, can you give us any updates on anything you're potentially working on for JAKIB Sports, SI.com? And also, can you fill the people in on the remaining schedule for the Philadelphia Eagles going forward beyond this Saturday preseason game?
Yeah, it's between now and Thursday, think about you got 2 games and 2 joint practices. So a lot of stuff is going to be happening over the next week. You're going to get to see a lot of the backups in the games. The first team's probably going to do much of their work in the joint practices with the Cleveland Browns. Some great, Cleveland, if you think about some of the talent they have, Jordan Mailata has already been talking about Myles Garrett. Zadarius Smith is there now. They have 2 tremendous pass rushers. We know the talent of Deshaun Watson. He and Jalen Hurts are very close. That's a very gifted team, so they're going to be tested by the Cleveland Browns, and it's got that is going to be. And unfortunately, fans don't get to see it, but that's going to give us a real beat on where the Eagles are as a team, and the games I think is going to be for as I mentioned, the second teamers and specifically the running backs. Rashad Penny's got to play well. Trey Sermon's got to play well. At linebacker, Nicholas Moro's playing for his Eagles life, so to speak. Miles Jack's got to prove he's got something left. Zach Cunningham. That's sort of for the games, and the first team guys will probably sharpen it against the Browns in the joint practices. And Jim Schwartz will be back. So, Jim is the defensive coordinator in Cleveland now. So, what his defense is if you were paying attention to the Eagles, what we're just talking about in their history. You give Jim Schwartz Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith, you know,
Ooh.
that's the biggest. That's going to be a big test for that strength versus strength. Eagles offensive line versus those edge rushers.
Absolutely. You guys heard it here first. Look, before you get out of here, make sure you guys smash that like button. Make sure you guys comment below with any sort of questions or your takes on what me and John talked about today as well. On top of that, make sure you guys are subscribed to the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. You guys know we have some of the best content on YouTube, right? There's Birds 365 with Jody Mack and John McMullen. And then on top of that, at 11 a.m., well, 11 a.m. my time, 12 p.m. Eastern time, you have Sports Take with Derek Gunn and Rob Ellis. And then to close out your afternoon, you have the National Football Show with Dan Cilio. Come on, man. It doesn't get any better than that. So make sure you guys continue to stay locked in and make sure you guys always stay engaged in JAKIB Sports. If you want more from John, if you guys are avid readers of his content, check him out on SI.com, but most notably, check him out on JAKIBsports.com. That's JAKIB Sports.com. John, as always, it's a pleasure, my friend. Eagles fans, take care. One love. Stay humble, stay healthy, stay hungry. You guys are locked in on Football 24/7. He's John McMullen. I'm Tony DeShields II. We out of here.